Hello, I'll just introduce myself. My name's Kelly Jones, and my topic will be on the corruption of culture and how the rights of Cambodian women and children, girls, has been affected by the modern exacerbation of the sex industry. Looking at some of the reasons behind that and some conclusions for how to improve this in the future.
Following the 1970s Khmer Rouge regime, a decade of Vietnamese occupation and a civil war ending in the early 90s, Cambodia remains a vulnerable state. The destruction of a normal economy, accompanied by the collapse of law and order, contributed to an overall environment of exploitation. We will explore how this situation has specifically affected the cultural norms applied to women sexually, and specifically the exacerbation of prostitution. Traditional cultural and Buddhist religious attitudes have positioned women to be treated as inferior to men. Patriarchal abuses have then been exacerbated by an overwhelming and rapid Western influence since the 1990s UN peacekeeping mission. Globalization has resulted in an enormous cultural influence held by Westerners since this time. One such influence includes the influx of pornography. Exactly what level of influence this has had on Cambodian women's rights will also be explored. It is important to note the extraordinary impact armed conflict, occupation and mass murder has had on Cambodia in the past 40 years. Beginning with the Cambodian Holocaust and the killing fields of Pol Pot, Cambodia has suffered and waged both internally and against external forces for the best part of 30 years. Individual and collective trauma during these decades has dismembered and separated families from every social standing. The Human Rights Task Force describes a general culture of mistrust among neighbours, a weakening of community spirit, dependent existence on refugee camps, social discord because of repression and social divisions. Even as conflicts subside, difficult economic and social conditions leave many people unemployed, and the conditions are then exacerbated by the already low status of women and girls, where there is an experience of armed conflict. Strict policies under Vietnamese rule from 1980 to 1989, such as the arrest of sex workers and their detention, kept the problem of prostituted women under control. However, the tearing of Cambodia's social fabric has resulted in a vulnerable state of affairs for women. Human rights standards have long been a volatile position of negotiation and renegotiation between culture, state, tradition, and now also international law. For example, previous legal frameworks have treated rape as a civil rather than a criminal offence settled by compensation. Changes to the judicial system are now being influenced heavily by UN TAC provisions and current international collaborative legislations. Nilofer Kajate argues that high casualties among young men during the 1980s and early 90s saw a surplus of women of a marriageable age. This led to a decline in the status of women in their family. Before the war, women had enjoyed an honoured position in the family, and men usually lived with their wife and her parents after marriage. Due to post-conflict demographic imbalances, men have found themselves to be in a position to bargain over women. Khmer women often prefer to be the second or third wife than to remain unmarried, although this is technically illegal. Cambodian culture, known officially as Khmer culture, is generally considered to be conservative. Theravada Buddhism is practiced by 95% of the population, and its followers adhere to the core concepts of karma, collectivism, and saving face. These religious teachings underpin and reinforce Khmer cultural attitudes. On one hand, Buddhism represents an ethos of non-violence and compassion, but on the other hand, it promotes the rather merciless laws of karma. Some fundamental interpretations of this doctrine lead to huge disparities in the realization of human rights for men and especially for women. Collectivism, a commonly accepted Asian value, has seen importance of the family unit and community trump that of the individual, particularly women. Contradictory to the alleged unimportance of the individual compared to the community, though, Khmer girls and boys are taught very different codes of expected cultural behaviour. Cambodian men therefore reap the rewards of a deeply patriarchal society. Women are expected to follow the teachings of Chab Sray, which is still taught in schools. This teaching dictates that women are less than men and do not have the right to be free in action. Because good Cambodian girls are not supposed to be sexual creatures, validating men's free use of prostituted women before and during marriage. A popular Cambodian proverb states that men are gold and women are cloth, metaphorically explaining the need for virginity in a wife, as gold can be washed clean but cloth that is dirtied is ruined forever. The husband's virginity, however, is of no importance whatsoever. This contemporary Khmer song illustrates the phenomenon. If you have a look at the lyrics there, words like the relationship is a bridge to hell on earth, cruelty, lessons to learn are never again to experience the love game. Anyway, the overall tone of the piece is basically symbolic of the submission that women are under. Gender roles and statuses are inextricably linked in Cambodian culture. The importance of female gender expectations is seen in research among Khmer refugees communities in the United States. The United Nations report on the status of women states that amid the assimilation into a new, radically different society, certain aspects of gender identity were considered absolutely inflexible. The virginity of a bride and the higher ranking of a man relative to a woman were two examples. Indeed, to challenge inequities of gender was perceived as a challenge to the very core of the Khmer social structure and a threat to traditional Khmer identity. Once the girl is tarnished, she is devalued and unmarriable, and often then ends up with few other options other than poorly paid work and prostitution. Once her honour is damaged, many Khmer women see no future for themselves outside of this. Women face a fragmented society with lower education, less skills, and less capital in terms of power or politics. The girls and women who find themselves victims in this cultural torrent are then seen as objects to be bought and sold, raped and beaten. They are not treated as human beings, let alone human beings with any rights. Men and women both dehumanize other women in prostitution, seeing them as inferior and even believe that prostitution prevents rape. It is generally accepted that men have an insatiable sex drive, and it is the role of the woman to appease that. 10 rivers is not enough to fill one ocean is the Khmer proverbial explanation for. The relative peace of the 1990s saw a resurgence of Buddhist practices. However, this also reflected an increasingly patriarchal and anti-feminist state influenced by the past communist political and social trends. On the one hand, Buddhism represents an ethos of non-violence and compassion, but on the other hand, it promotes the rather merciless laws of karma. Khmer culture is grounded by the principles of karma, which can be dangerous, as women who are abused often accept their situation as a cumulative result of deeds in a previous incarnation. The irony is that the alleged attempt to see the community's needs come first has seen one integral group of the community suffer more than any other: women and girls. Gender attitudes induced by Theravada Buddhism have embedded norms and stereotypes that shape everyday behaviours and decision-making. Khmer women's roles greatly affect the statuses of their husbands, therefore making it generally impossible for a sexually assaulted, including a girlfriend, or prostituted woman to marry. These negative and restricting attitudes combined with others to continually justify and perpetuate the institution of prostitution, in which a separate and denigrated class of women is available to men for sexual use. So the first noble truth of Theravada Buddhism is often translated as life is suffering. It is not surprising then that many women and girls reluctantly yet unquestionably accept their fate, having their human rights grossly violated by Cambodian nationals and foreigners through sexual abuses. Cambodians have a less than strict concept of upholding the principles of traditional Buddhism, however, and according to Walsh, one could say that Buddhism does not currently foster a strong sense of collective social responsibility in today's Cambodia. Many monks are novices, and whilst they're highly respected, they do not always offer the best leadership in theology of religion. The relationship here between culture, religion, and women's rights appears entwined and inextricably linked to the treatment of these individuals within society. Perhaps a refocusing on some interpretations of Theravada Buddhism in a contemporary setting would see progress in the definition of concepts such as karma. The influx of Western culture will now be looked at. So this, combined with the exploitative traditional attitudes towards men seeing prostitutes, has seen the birth of a contemporary sex industry fueled by the low cultural and socioeconomic status of Khmer women. Further looking at women's rights, Cambodia remained relatively unaffected by Western culture prior to the Paris Peace Agreement and the arrival of approximately 20,000 peacekeeping troops in 1991.
Peacekeeping forces are normally deployed to places where the social fabric has been torn apart by civil strife, and Cambodia was no different. The Human Rights Task Force on Cambodia in 1996 reported an increase from 4,000 to approximately 20,000 prostituted girls in the first 6 months of the UN presence. Following the 1993 withdrawal of troops, the demand plummeted and an estimated 5,000 prostituted women remained. Alarmingly, by 1998, the numbers had reached their all-time high, with over 25,000 prostituted women and girls alone in Cambodia. To meet the rising demand following the presence of tens of thousands of expatriates and UN peacekeepers, many Westerners openly set up brothels and were soon frequented by local customers as well. This undoubtedly was the institutionalizing of the phenomenon. Cambodia's first real taste of Western globalization was during this period of time. The newcomers also brought with them liberal and relaxed attitudes towards sex, pornography, and prostitution. This rapid and largely unmonitored foreign influence has had some dire consequences. Khmer culture has now seen to be the catalyst for a number of potent social influences to develop. The liberal interpretation of the rights of the individual in the Western world and the influence that this initially had on the Khmer culture has arguably done little to improve the rights of Cambodian individuals, particularly women. The implosion of cultures upon each other in the 20th century has seen a thrust of a globalized world and witnessed many fragmented societies wrestle with rapid and vast cultural influences. Cambodia's social fabric is vulnerable and damaged, and certainly struggling with the melting pot of cultures, which includes East versus West, Old versus New. There is much evidence to prove a direct connection between Cambodian men who view pornography and men who then seek out sex with women, be it consensual or not. The men who watch the most pornography buy sex most often. It's clear that viewing gang rape pornography, a new phenomena, a fashion almost, specifically from Western or Caucasian cultures, has had a strong effect on a man's decision to then perpetuate gang rape against a woman. A recent report, A Thorn in the Heart, Cambodian Men Who Buy Sex, details damning statistics that the production and viewing of Western pornography directly impacts on the sexual expectations of Khmer women. Fordham explains that most of the pornography featured sex as an arena where male aggression is directed towards female bodies. The teachings of Chab Sray, or the Woman's Code, also allow women to be dehumanized and objectified as insatiable sex machines ready to accommodate every sexual request. Their role is also seen through Theravada Buddhism or is underpinned by Theravada Buddhism to appease and please men. So in this way, the traditional and accepted norms and attitudes towards the treatment of women are validated and then dangerously promoted by the saturation of predominantly Western pornography, but more increasingly Asian pornographies as well. Unrealistic expectations in men's minds in regards to their sex lives have just caused this industry to grow and grow and grow. So the word bok in Khmer actually translates to gang rape, and there's different degrees of the translation of this word depending on how severe the gang rape is. A research shows that in the categories of watching pornography of group sex, not less than 75% consisted of Western actors, and alarmingly 98% of men had seen a Western woman or girl being gang raped via pornography. It does beg the question of whether or not gang rape is a foreign phenomenon. One man here is quoted saying, "I think foreigners know more about gang rape as it's happened as a result of foreign cultures coming to Cambodia. It's the inflow of sex movies which is staining Khmer traditions." But I guess we have to ask ourselves as well, what is underpinning the society that allows for such a pandemic to occur? Obviously there's been issues with the breaking down of the social fabric in Cambodia, but how this has affected girls and women is out of control proportionately compared to like countries as well. Even in the region, it's become an absolute pandemic. Whilst it's difficult to make broad sweeping conclusions about how to improve the plight of women in Cambodia, some basic conclusions can be made, and regarding to what has negatively affected women's rights in Cambodia. Those being the impact of conflict on culture and the Khmer Rouge regime, the effects of foreign occupation and Western globalization, the influx of pornography and also tourism, deep-set gender expectations underpinned by Cambodian definitions of Theravada Buddhism and the traditional Khmer cultural concepts about the power between men and women. Social stability achieved through education and self-sustainable frameworks will see communities benefit, and while seeing communities benefit, we'll see the improvement of individuals' rights, those particularly being the rights of women and children in Cambodia. So here's my bibliography and list of online sources. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. I look forward to discussing some ideas with you all on the notice board or discussion board. Okay, thanks. Bye.